She was known across the stars as the Girl of Fire, her name spoken with fear in every corner of the galaxy. Empires whispered about her rage, and kings warned their soldiers never to cross her path. When she appeared, whole worlds seemed to tremble. Her skin carried glowing marks like burning embers, alive and pulsing as if fire lived under her flesh. Her eyes blazed bright, and when she raised her hand, armies fell. Many believed she was cursed. Others believed she was chosen by ancient gods of war. Whatever the truth was, she had become a storm that no one could control. But storms are lonely. No one saw the girl beneath the fire. No one asked why she fought. They only feared what she would do next. She had not always been this way. Once she was a princess of her people. Young, hopeful, dreaming of peace, but betrayal had turned her heart to ashes. Her own kin had sold her to warlords. Her body scarred, her soul torn apart. The fire inside her was not a gift, it was survival. For years she burned through enemies, leaving nothing but ruins behind. Villages were cleared before she arrived. Starships fled at the sight of her shadow. People told stories to children at night, warning them that if they disobeyed, the Girl of Fire would come. She carried this curse alone, never resting, never trusted, and never safe. One night, hunted again, she crashed on a quiet, forgotten moon. Smoke curled around her broken ship, her body weak from battle. She expected soldiers to come and finish her, yet silence filled the cold night. Then she heard footsteps, slow, careful, human. A man stepped into the smoke, his clothes simple. His hands covered with grease. He was no soldier, no hunter, just a mechanic who lived among broken machines. He should have run the moment he saw her glowing eyes, but he didn't. Their eyes met, hers blazing with warning, his calm but steady. He looked at her not with fear, not with hate, but with something she had not seen in years. Concern. She raised her hand, ready to strike, the fire inside her roaring, but he only whispered, "You're safe with me." The word struck her harder than any weapon. She froze, her fire dimming for a breath. Safe. No one had said that word to her since she was a child. Safe. She did not believe it, yet his voice carried no lie. She stumbled, her knees weak, and the man rushed forward, not with chains, not with a blade, but with his arms outstretched. He caught her before she hit the ground, for a moment. The galaxy's most feared warrior rested against the chest of a human stranger. She should have killed him. She should have destroyed him before his kindness could turn into betrayal. But her body betrayed her first. Too weak, too tired, too wounded, she let him carry her, through the smoke and the ruins of her ship. He guided her to a small workshop hidden in the cliffs. The air smelled of oil and metal. The warmth of machines filled the cold night. She expected him to tie her down, to sell her, to call the hunters who would pay in gold and blood. But he did none of that. He set her down gently, gave her water, and covered her with an old blanket. The Girl of Fire lay there, confused, her heart racing faster than any battle had ever made it. Why had he not run? Why had he not feared her? Why had he not tried to claim her? The human moved quietly around the workshop, fixing broken lights, preparing food, glancing at her only to make sure she was still breathing. His silence was strange, his calm even stranger. Outside, the stars burned and hunters searched. But for the first time in years, the Girl of Fire did not feel like prey. She did not trust him, not yet. But when his words echoed again in her mind, "You're safe with me," she closed her eyes, and for one fragile moment believed them. The galaxy trembled at her fury, but in that small workshop, in the arms of a human mechanic, she was only a girl, broken, scarred, and desperately needing the safety he promised. The workshop was quiet, filled with the hum of machines and the faint drip of oil. The human moved around slowly, like a man who was used to fixing broken things. His hands were steady, his face calm, and yet he had just carried into his home the most feared being in the galaxy. The Girl of Fire lay on a makeshift bed he had built from spare metal and old cloth. Her glowing marks pulsed faintly. Her breathing was heavy. She should have been dangerous even in her weakened state, but now she looked more like a wounded creature struggling to survive. He brought her water first, holding it out without a word. She eyed the cup with suspicion, her fingers twitching as if expecting poison. When he didn't move closer, she finally reached for it, her trembling hands brushing his for a second. Warmth spread across her skin and she drank. The water was simple, clean, yet it tasted like something rare, something pure. It felt like trust. The human watched her but did not stare. He respected her silence, and when she looked away, he turned back to his workbench, tightening bolts and adjusting wires. She didn't understand him. He was not afraid, not cruel, and not greedy. He was ordinary. For her, ordinary was strange. "Why?" she whispered, her voice hoarse, her eyes sharp. "Why did you not run?" The man looked up, surprised at her question. He wiped grease from his hands and said quietly, "Because you look tired." Her mind stopped. Stunned. No one had ever cared if she was tired. No one had ever dared to see her as anything but fire and fury. She narrowed her eyes, searching his face for lies. But there were none. Still, trust was a dangerous thing. She had learned long ago that kindness often hid knives. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, her eyes darting to the door, her body tense, ready to flee or kill. The human noticed but said nothing instead. He placed a small plate of food near her, bread, dried fruit, and something warm in a metal bowl. The smell reached her first, her stomach twisted with hunger. She hated that her body betrayed her. But she had not eaten in days. She stared at the food, then at him, waiting, expecting him to demand something in return, but he simply turned away, humming softly as he worked on a broken engine. Slowly, carefully, she lifted the bread. Her hands shaking, she took a bite and her eyes burned with something unfamiliar. Tears. It had been so long since anyone fed her without chains, without deals, without cruelty. As the night deepened, shadows stretched across the workshop walls. Outside, hunters searched the moon. Ships scanned for energy traces. She knew it was only a matter of time before they found her. The human knew it too. He wasn't foolish. His eyes flickered to the skies every so often, yet he stayed calm. His calmness wrapped around her like another blanket. She tried to speak again, her voice low. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes," he answered simply, not looking at her. "And you still keep me here?" "Yes. Are you not afraid?" He paused, then finally turned, his eyes steady. "I've fixed broken machines all my life. You look more tired than dangerous to me." Her chest tightened. His words pierced deeper than blades. Tired. Yes, she was tired. More than anyone knew for the first time. She lowered her guard just slightly. Her fire dimmed, and she leaned back against the cold wall, her glowing marks fading softer. Silence stretched between them, but it was not the sharp silence of fear or hate. It was a silence filled with strange peace. The human worked late into the night, fixing lights, welding scraps, adjusting gears, every so often glancing to check if she was still breathing. She watched him secretly, wondering how such a simple man could make her feel safer than entire armies ever had. When exhaustion pulled her under, she closed her eyes, her hand still clutching the blanket like a shield. In her dreams, she heard footsteps, shouting fire, betrayal. But when she woke hours later, it was different. The workshop was warm, the lights still glowing. The human asleep on a chair with his arms crossed, his head tilted back. He hadn't locked her in. He hadn't tied her down. The door was open. She could leave if she wished. Her heart raced. She could run. She could vanish, but her legs refused to move. Instead, she whispered to herself, "Safe," as if testing the word again. And for once, it didn't feel like a lie. Outside, the galaxy hunted her. Fleets prepared to descend. Her enemies sharpened their blades, but in that fragile night, in a small workshop on a forgotten moon, the girl of fire rested, sheltered not by walls, but by the strange, steady kindness of one human who refused to run. The next day began with silence, but silence on a hunted moon was never safe. The girl of fire woke first, her glowing marks faint under the morning light. She sat up slowly, her body still weak, her eyes sharp. She could feel it in the air. The sky was too heavy, too restless. The human was already at work, tightening bolts on a small shuttle he was building from scraps. His hair messy, his face lined with focus. He looked ordinary, but his calm was something rare. She watched him, her heart unsure why this simple man had not betrayed her yet. Then the ground shook. The workshop rattled. Dust fell from the ceiling. She froze, her eyes lifting to the sky above the cliffs. Shadows spread across the light. Warships hovered, dark shapes cutting through the clouds, their engines roaring like thunder. Fleets of hunters had arrived. The human stepped outside. Squinting against the glow of engines, his jaw tightened. He knew this moment would come. Soldiers descended, armored figures with plasma rifles, their boots heavy on the rocky ground. Their leader raised a hand and shouted through a voice amplifier, "Human, give her to us, hand over the fire witch, and you may live inside the workshop." She tensed, her hand twitching toward her blade. Her fire flickered in her veins. She expected him to step aside, to push her forward, to sell her for safety after all. Why would anyone risk their life for her? But the human stood at the doorway, his body blocking the entrance. His hands empty, yet his voice strong. "She stays." The soldiers laughed, their voices echoing against the cliffs. One lowered his weapon and sneered. "A fragile human dares protect the galaxy's most dangerous creature." The human did not move. His heart pounded, sweat formed at his brow, but his feet were steady. His voice did not shake. Inside, the girl of fire felt something unfamiliar. Shock. The soldiers stepped closer, their rifles humming with deadly energy. "Stand aside, mechanic. We will not ask again." The human's eyes flickered back once, meeting hers. In his gaze, she saw no fear, only a strange truth. He had already made his choice. Her heart burned, not with fury this time, but with something she did not know how to name. She rose, stepping out from the shadows, her glowing marks igniting, fire curling from her palms. The soldiers shifted uneasily, their laughter fading. But then, something unexpected happened. She did not stand before them as a weapon. She stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder with the human who had sheltered her. The soldiers hesitated, doubt flickering in their eyes. She was not chained. She was not hiding behind him. She had chosen to stand at his side. The leader snarled, "You dare protect her? Human, she is death, she is ruin. She has burned entire fleets." The human's jaw clenched. He answered simply, "Maybe, but she is safe here." The silence that followed was heavier than the warships above. The soldiers shifted, their rifles still raised, but their hands less steady. They had expected a broken fugitive, not a warrior standing with a human at her side. The leader barked an order, and in an instant the soldiers fired. Plasma bolts cut through the air. The human pulled her back, fire erupted from her hands. Blazing walls of heat swallowed the energy. The ground shook, the cliffs cracked. Flames danced in her eyes, the soldiers fell back. Some shouting, some stumbling. None prepared for the storm she unleashed. Her fury was alive again. But this time it was not wild. It was sharp. It was aimed. Guided by the human's voice calling her name. The warships above pulled higher, engines flaring. They had seen enough. Even with fleets, even with rifles, facing the girl of fire was suicide. As the last soldier fled, silence returned, broken only by the hiss of smoke and the faint hum of machines inside the workshop. The human let out a breath he didn't know he was holding, his hands trembling slightly now that the danger had passed. She turned to him, her fire dimming. He had stood for her, risked his life when he could have saved himself. No one had ever done that, not even her own people. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her mind a storm of feelings she could not understand. Finally, she whispered, "Why?" The human wiped the sweat from his brow, his voice quiet. "Because you deserve more than fear." The words echoed in her heart. Louder than the roar of any fleet, she stared at him, this ordinary man who had just defied armies with nothing but his voice. For the first time in years, the girl of fire felt her fury twist into something else. Not weakness, not surrender, but the fragile beginning of trust. The storm above had passed for now, but she knew more would come. Fleets would return, empires would not forget, yet deep inside, a thought burned quietly. Maybe she no longer had to face them alone. The workshop was quiet again, though the smell of smoke still hung heavy in the air. The girl of fire sat against the wall, her body trembling from the battle, her glowing marks dimming with exhaustion. Outside, the cliffs bore black scars where her flames had struck. The human moved slowly around the room, checking wires, fixing machines, cleaning burns from the metal walls. He acted as if nothing unusual had happened, as if standing against warships was an ordinary day. She could not understand him. His calm unsettled her more than the soldiers' weapons. When most people saw her fury, they ran or cursed her name. But he had stood beside her without hesitation. She was used to being feared, hated, or hunted, not trusted. As the night deepened, silence stretched between them. She tried to close her eyes, but memories clawed at her. Screams, betrayal, fire. She turned away. But the blanket slipped from her shoulder, and the human saw the scars that covered her back. His hands froze, the wrench in his grip slipping slightly. She stiffened, anger rushing through her veins. She wanted to cover herself, to hide, but she could not. The scars ran deep. Ugly burns etched across her skin, carved there by chains and whips long ago, marks of torture she had never allowed anyone to see. She expected him to ask, to demand answers, or to flinch at the sight, but he did none of that. Instead, his voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Who did this to you?" Her chest tightened. Her heart pounded. For years, no one had dared ask, not out of care, but out of fear. She narrowed her eyes, fire flickering faintly in her gaze. "Why do you want to know?" The human didn't look away. "Because I want to understand, not the fury, not the fire. But you?" Her breath caught. She had spent her whole life being treated like a weapon, like a curse. No one had ever asked about the girl beneath the flames. Her lips trembled, anger and pain tangled inside her. She turned her face away. They betrayed me, she whispered finally, her voice breaking like glass. My own people, my own blood, they sold me to warlords. They burned me when I refused to obey. They made me into what I am. The words spilled like poison, words she had buried for years. She had told herself never to speak them, yet here they were, bleeding into the air of a quiet workshop. The human listened, his eyes steady, his silence heavy but not empty. She felt no judgment in him, only something she could not name. Her voice grew sharper, harsher. Do you understand now, mechanic? I am not fire because I want to be. I am fire because I had to be. I burned or I died. I destroyed or I was destroyed. She waited for him to recoil, to finally see her as the monster everyone else saw, but he did not. He only stepped closer, his hand hovering as if to touch her shoulder, then stopping, respecting the distance she kept. You are still here, he said simply. Not because of the fire, but because of your will. Her eyes widened. His words sliced through the darkness like light. She clenched her fists, struggling to hold back the emotions clawing at her chest. For the first time, she felt the mask crack. The mask she had worn for years. The face of fury, of a warrior who needed no one. She hated feeling weak, hated showing pain. Yet with him, her mask slipped. Her body shook, her fire dimmed. And in the silence of that workshop, she whispered words she never thought she'd speak. I don't want to be this anymore. The human crouched near her, his voice low. Then you don't have to burn everything just to survive. You don't have to fight alone anymore. Her throat tightened. Tears threatened her eyes. She turned away quickly, furious at herself for letting him see her like this. But his words clung to her like the blanket around her shoulders. The night stretched long, the sound of machines filling the space between them. She stared at the walls, her scars aching, her heart unsteady. For the first time in years, she was not treated as a weapon, not as a curse, but as a person. She didn't know if she could believe him. She didn't know if she could stop being the fire. But when she finally closed her eyes, she felt something she thought had died long ago. Hope, fragile, trembling, but alive. And in the corner of the workshop, the human sat quietly, keeping watch as if guarding not the girl of fire, but the broken mask she had finally begun to set aside. The morning came with a red sky, clouds torn apart by the engines of ships passing high above. The girl of fire stood at the edge of the cliff near the workshop, the wind pulling at her hair, her glowing marks dim but restless. She could feel the storm building again. The human joined her, holding a metal cup of water in his hand, his face calm but serious. He looked up at the sky and spoke in a low voice. They're not done, they will come back, and this time they will not just send soldiers. They'll send fleets. She didn't answer. Her jaw tight, she already knew it. She had lived her whole life hunted, but never before had someone else been caught in her storm. She glanced at him, at this ordinary mechanic who had already risked too much for her. They will offer you freedom, she said quietly. They will promise you wealth, they will demand my head. You can still choose safety. The human sipped from his cup, then set it aside, his eyes steady. I already chose. Her chest tightened. She wanted to ask why. She wanted to demand how a human could stand against empires, but his eyes told her the answer. He wasn't standing against the galaxy. He was standing with her. The sky darkened. Fleets of enemy ships began to gather, their metal bodies gleaming like knives in the sun. Loudspeakers boomed across the canyon, voices demanding her surrender, promising the human safe passage if he betrayed her. Her fire flickered in anger, but her heart twisted in fear. Not for herself, but for him, she turned, gripping his arm. You can't fight them. You will die if you stand with me. He looked at her scars, at the trembling fire in her eyes, and said quietly, Then I'll die with my choice. The words shook her deeper than any weapon. She stepped back, unable to speak. Her fury had always been her armor, but his choice cut through it like light through smoke. Together they worked. She gathered her strength. He scavenged every scrap in the workshop. They built traps from old machines, turrets from broken engines, shields from shattered parts. His human hands were steady, his mind sharp, while she poured her fire into shaping weapons stronger than steel. At night, they sat side by side. Exhaustion pulling at them, she asked him questions she had never cared to ask before. Why risk everything for me, she whispered. Because someone had to, he said. And I was here. She turned away, frustrated, and moved all at once. Do you not fear me? I see the fire, he admitted. But I also see the girl who carries it, and she's worth saving." The words burned hotter in her heart than the flames in her veins. When dawn came, the fleets were ready. Lines of ships filled the horizon, their weapons glowing. Their commanders shouted through comms for her to surrender. Their promises and threats filled the air. The human stood on the cliff beside her, his hands empty but his presence unshaken. He looked small against the power of fleets, but his stance was stronger than kings. She could have left him. She could have fled into the wilderness, left him behind to save himself. But she did not for the first time in years. She did not want to run. The choice pressed heavy on her chest. Fire coiling in her veins, the galaxy demanded her fury. But the human's voice lingered in her heart. "You don't have to burn everything just to survive." She raised her head, her eyes blazing, and whispered, "Then I choose fire. But not for them. Not for revenge, I choose it for us." Her flames ignited, brighter than they had ever been, but different, controlled, shaped. Her fury sharpened not by hate but by purpose. The fleets hesitated, their sensors screaming, their commanders unsure. This was not the wild firestorm they had chased across the stars. This was something else, something stronger. The human raised a hand toward her, not in command but in trust. She stepped forward, her fire roaring like a rising sun. The ground shook, the cliffs burned. The sky turned red. The enemy had offered him wealth, safety, freedom, and he had refused. She had offered him nothing. Yet he had chosen her, and now she chose him back. The choice of fire was no longer survival. It was no longer loneliness. It was two souls standing together against a galaxy that trembled in fear. The fleets opened fire. The battle began, and for the first time in her life, she fought not because she had to, but because she wanted to protect the one who had chosen her when no one else dared. The sky split open as the fleets fired, beams of plasma tearing through the air. Explosions shook the cliffs, dust and fire rained down. The girl of fire stood at the edge, her glowing marks blazing like molten rivers across her skin. She raised her arms and the flames roared to life. But this time it was different. The fire did not spill wild and uncontrolled. It moved like a living storm guided by her will. She bent it, shaped it, her fury no longer a curse but a weapon sharpened by choice. The human shouted over the roar, pulling levers and switches inside the workshop. His traps came alive, old turrets whirred, shields of metal and scrap lifted into place, glowing blue as energy surged through them. Together they were no longer prey. They were a wall of defiance against the galaxy itself. Enemy ships descended lower, their commanders barking orders. Waves of soldiers launched from dropships, armored bodies hitting the cliffs, rifles blazing. The human ducked behind the barricade he had built, firing back with a rifle patched together from scraps. His shots were precise, each one covering her as she moved forward. She met the first wave of soldiers with fire. Their weapons melted in their hands, their armor cracked under the heat. Their screams filled the canyon, yet her fury was no longer blind. She struck with purpose, protecting the workshop, protecting the human who had given her a reason to fight beyond survival. More soldiers came, endless like the tide. She faltered for a moment, her body straining. Fire clawing at her veins, she was strong but not infinite. Then she heard his voice through the chaos, steady, sharp. "You're not alone." The words steadied her. Her flame surged brighter. She pushed back, the ground itself glowing with heat as soldiers scattered. Ships above hesitated, their scans warning of energy levels beyond calculation. The fleets opened heavy fire, plasma storms raining down. The human rushed to his machines, activating shields that glowed against the blasts. Sparks flew, metal screamed, but the shields held, he shouted. Now she leapt, her body blazing. Her fire-forming wings of light, she soared upward, her fury a comet tearing through the sky. Ships tilted, firing at her, but her flames twisted their beams. Bending energy back, engines erupted in explosions. One by one, ships fell from the sky. Crashing into the cliffs, the commanders panicked. Voices breaking over comms. Contain her. Stop her before she burns the fleet. But they were too late. She was no longer the hunted. No longer a weapon used by others, she was her own fire. Unleashed with purpose, her fury controlled, sharpened and unstoppable. The human worked tirelessly below, patching broken shields, redirecting power, firing shots where soldiers tried to flank her. His sweat dripped, his hands blistered, yet he never stopped. His voice rose again. "I've got you. Keep going." Her fire roared in answer. For hours the battle raged, sky and ground lit with fire and thunder. Soldiers fell, ships burned. The cliffs cracked under the weight of war, yet she and the human stood unbroken. Finally, the fleets faltered, their commanders realizing the truth. They had sent armies and ships, but they had not understood. The Girl of Fire was no longer alone, and a warrior with something to protect is more dangerous than 1,000 fleets. One by one, the ships retreated, their engines burning trails into the red sky. Silence fell again, broken only by the crackle of dying flames and the hum of the humans' battered machines. The Girl of Fire landed heavily on the cliffs, her knees buckling, her body trembling, her flames flickering weakly. She had poured everything into the battle, yet her eyes burned with life. The human rushed to her, catching her before she collapsed. His arms steady around her, she looked up at him, her lips trembling with words she had never spoken. "You kept me steady," she whispered, her voice faint. He shook his head, his voice rough. "No, you kept yourself steady. I only reminded you weren't alone." Her chest ached, not from the fire, but from the truth. For years she had believed fury was her only shield, her only weapon. Now she saw it differently. Fury was strength, but love, trust, and purpose were what gave it power. She leaned against him, her body weak, her heart trembling. "They will come again. Then we'll face them again," he answered without hesitation. She closed her eyes, exhausted but alive. The battle had not destroyed her. It had remade her. The fury unleashed was not chaos anymore. It was hope forged in fire. And as long as the humans stood beside her, the galaxy could tremble, but she would never stand alone again. The battlefield was silent at last. Smoke curled from the wreckage of broken ships. Scorched metal lay across the cliffs. The air still shimmered with the heat of her flames, but the sky was empty, the fleets were gone. The Girl of Fire stood weakly beside the human, her glowing marks dim like fading embers. She had unleashed her fury, she had bent fire into storms, and yet she was still alive, more alive than she had felt in years. Her knees wavered and he caught her again, guiding her back into the workshop. His arms steady, his breath heavy but calm. She leaned into him, her pride screaming to resist, but her heart whispering to rest. Inside, the machines hummed faintly. The shields cracked and smoking. Scraps littered the floor. The workshop looked like a ruin, but to her it felt like a shelter carved from the storms of the galaxy. He set her down carefully, placing a blanket over her shoulders, his hands shaking from exhaustion, his face streaked with grease and soot. Yet his eyes were steady, always steady. For a long time neither spoke. The silence between them was no longer sharp. It was gentle, like the quiet after rain. Finally, she whispered, "They will come again, fleets, empires, the galaxy does not forget. They will not stop hunting me." The human nodded slowly, his gaze on the broken machines around them. "I know." "Then why?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Why do you stay? Why do you fight beside me when the whole galaxy wants me dead?" He turned his eyes to her, his voice quiet but firm. "Because you're not just fire. You're more than what they say. You're worth more than their fear. And I will not let them take that from you." Her chest ached. Her hands trembled. She had heard many words in her life. Commands, curses, screams, lies, but never these. Never words that stripped away her mask and touched the girl beneath. Tears burned her eyes. She turned her face away, ashamed. "I don't know how to be anything else. I don't know how to be safe." His voice softened. "Then let me show you. You don't have to carry it alone. You don't have to burn every time you breathe. Here with me, you can rest." She closed her eyes, the weight of his words sinking deep. For years she had believed safety was a lie, a trick now. Sitting in the broken workshop with his hand resting near hers, she felt something she had thought was impossible. Peace. Fragile, trembling, but real. The days that followed were quiet. The galaxy licked its wounds. Whispers spread across star systems. Stories of the firestorm who stood with a human, fleets that had been broken, commanders who had fled. They spoke of her with even more fear than before. But she no longer carried it alone. She worked beside him, repairing the workshop, mending machines, learning to use her fire not just for destruction, but for creation. He showed her how to fuse metal with control, how to guide heat like a tool, how to let flames shape instead of burn. For the first time, her fire built instead of destroyed. At night, they sat outside the cliffs, the stars stretching endless above them. She would lean back against the rocks, her hair loose, her fire calm, and he would sit beside her, quiet but close, sometimes speaking, sometimes only listening. One night she asked softly, "Do you ever regret it? Choosing me?" He smiled faintly, shaking his head. "No, because the galaxy may tremble before your fury, but I saw the girl who wanted to be more, and I would choose her again. Her lips trembled. She had no words strong enough to answer, so she whispered only one, safe. And for once, it did not feel like a dream. The galaxy still trembled at her name. Empire still whispered of her fury. But in that small workshop on a forgotten moon, she was not a weapon, not a curse, not a storm. She was simply a girl with scars, a girl with fire, and a girl who had finally found a place where she belonged. And as she leaned against the human who had stood for her when no one else dared, she knew the truth. The safe place was not walls or shields, not even flames or fury. It was him. It had always been him. Let them tremble, she whispered into the night, her voice calm at last. Because I am safe with you.